They didn't have the courage to say her name, not at first. In the world of sports commentary, there exists a shadow language, a lexicon of implication, where directness is avoided and meaning is conveyed through winks, nudges, and carefully chosen euphemisms. It is a dance of insinuation, a tiptoe around the obvious. In a recent, glaring instance, the code words were "one player" and "hyperfixate." They were uttered with a knowing tone, as if the speakers and the audience were all participants in a shared secret, a silent agreement about who was really being discussed. The unspoken name hung in the air, a ghost haunting the conversation. Caitlin Clark. That's who they were talking about. That's who, it seems, they are always talking about. The sheer predictability of this pattern is what breeds a profound exhaustion. It is a wearying cycle of achievement met with not just critique, but with a specific, coded form of dismissal that questions the very legitimacy of the phenomenon she represents. Yet, this particular exhaustion has a limit. It is not a fatigue that leads to silence, but one that fuels a necessary rebuttal. Because what I witnessed, packaged as casual conversation on a popular podcast hosted by two legends, Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, crossed a line from passive criticism into active, endorsed undermining. It was a moment that demanded a response, a refusal to stay silent, while a young woman whose sole crime is a transcendent talent, and the popularity it has rightly earned, is dragged through the mud of implied illegitimacy again and again. This is not about fandom blind to nuance. This is about calling out a corrosive dynamic that threatens to poison a historic moment for women's sports. So, let us set the stage clearly. Approximately a week ago, the podcast A Touch More, hosted by Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, welcomed guest Katie Nolan. For those unfamiliar with Nolan, she is a media personality with a background in sports commentary. Her presence itself was not the issue. The issue was the segment that unfolded, a segment that did not feel like an accident or an offhand remark, but rather a calculated takedown disguised as analysis. What was most infuriating was the environment. Bird and Rapinoe did not merely allow this narrative to flow, they facilitated it. Through nods, engaged body language, and a lack of counterpoint, they set the table for the meal of criticism that was served. They became co-signers on a subtle yet potent attack. Caitlin Clark did not arrive at the WNBA's doorstep demanding a crown. She arrived with a basketball, a work ethic forged in Iowa gyms, and the simple, profound desire to compete at the highest level of the game she has loved since childhood. She came to live a dream, the culmination of a lifetime of preparation. The expected narrative for such a prospect, especially one who has demonstrably moved the needle for the entire sport, should be one of challenged welcome, a recognition that her arrival means a raising of the tide for all ships. Instead, she has been met with a bewildering and consistent pattern of targeting. Instead of celebration, she has been met with criticism that often veers into mockery. Instead of mentorship, she has been met with thinly veiled, coded commentary from figures who, given their stature and stated values, should unequivocally know better. Sue Bird, a pillar of the league's history, should know better. Megan Rapinoe, a crusader for equality and respect in women's sports, should know better. Katie Nolan, as a media professional, should have considered the impact of her words before launching into a coded critique on a major platform. But she didn't, and so here we are. Let me be unequivocal. This is not an attempt to manufacture drama or stoke outrage for clicks. This is a necessary response to a specific, recorded incident that, if left unaddressed, sends a dangerous message. It tells Caitlin Clark and every young athlete watching that it is acceptable to be systematically torn down not for any misconduct, but simply for being too good, too popular, too different. It normalizes resentment as a response to generational success. That is a precedent that cannot stand. So, let's delve deep. I have watched the clip in question repeatedly. I have analyzed the language, the tone, the cadence, and the context. What follows is a dissection of not just what was said, but the damaging worldview it represents. It is an examination of gatekeeping, jealousy, and a staggering failure to embrace a transformative moment. Trust me, Understanding the full implications of this exchange is crucial, and it reveals a deep tension at the heart of the WNBA's current evolution. Let's rewind the tape. The segment begins with the comfortable conversational cadence familiar to any podcast listener. Katie Nolan is settled in, seemingly at ease. Sue Bird offers attentive nods. Megan Rapinoe is engaged. The atmosphere is collegial. Then, the pivot. Nolan introduces the topic of sports hate, describing it as unique and fertile ground for discussion. Initially, this seems like it could lead to an interesting exploration of fan rivalry, the passion that borders on animosity, and the role it plays in sports culture. But that is not the destination. Smoothly, almost as if following an invisible script, Nolan transitions. She begins speaking about the WNBA's growing pains this season, the influx of new fans, and then she deploys the phrase that acts as the first red flag: people watching for weird reasons. What precisely constitutes a weird reason to watch a professional sports league? Is it weird to be drawn by the emergence of a once-in-a-generation talent who plays with audacious style and record-breaking production? Is it weird to be excited by an athlete who hits shots from the logo, who threads passes with impossible vision, who plays with a fiery competitiveness that is electrifying? Is it weird for parents to see in her a role model for their children, or for young girls to see a new paradigm of what is possible? Is it weird for casual sports fans, previously indifferent to the WNBA, to finally have an entry point, a compelling narrative, and a must-watch player that pulls them in? If that is weird, then the definition of normalcy in sports fandom is broken. Millions of people have been labeled weird by implication. Nolan continues, constructing a framework of conflict. She speaks of longtime fans clashing with new fans. She evokes the image of people who, just 2 years ago, might have dismissively said, "No one watches the WNBA," now finding one player to focus on. One player. The name remains unspoken, but the target is crystal clear. The tone shifts ever so slightly dismissive, edged with a condescension that suggests this newfound fandom is superficial, faddish, and less authentic than the true fandom of those who were there before. This is where the first major problem crystallizes: the insidious implication that new fans are inherently less valid. For decades, the mantra around women's basketball has been a plea for more. More attention, more viewers, more media coverage, more financial investment, more respect. The entire project of the WNBA has been a fight for visibility in a crowded sports landscape. Now, through a combination of factors with Caitlin Clark's college stardom acting as a massive accelerator, that visibility is exploding. Ratings are shattering records. Arenas are selling out, often for road games. Jerseys are flying off shelves. This is the watershed moment advocates have dreamed of. And the response from this particular corner? Not celebration, but gatekeeping. Not gratitude, but suspicion. The new fans, whose viewership and dollars are directly contributing to the league's financial health and cultural relevance, are being framed as a problem to be managed. Their motivations questioned, their right to be there subtly challenged. The logic is self-defeating. It translates to, we wanted more fans, but not like this. Not fans who came because of her. Caitlin Clark did not just bring eyeballs. She brought a palpable, infectious energy. She brought a new demographic, younger, broader, more mainstream, to the WNBA ecosystem. She created a cultural event out of regular season games. This is not a problem. It is an unprecedented gift. Yet, on that podcast, the perspective offered by Nolan and tacitly endorsed by Bird and Rapinoe framed it as a source of tension, a growing pain, rather than unadulterated growth. Then, the narrative deepens, and the language becomes more charged. Nolan proceeds to describe these new fans as hyperfixating on this one player, who, she claims, stands at odds with something. The sentence trails off. It is a masterclass in insinuation. With what? The sentence is deliberately unfinished, a rhetorical technique designed to plant a negative idea without the burden of proof. It invites the listener to fill in the blank with their own assumptions, which, given the context, are likely to be negative. It implies a fundamental incompatibility between Caitlin Clark and the league? Its culture, its established stars, its history? The vagueness is the point. It's cowardly. It's manipulative. It allows the speaker to convey criticism while maintaining plausible deniability. I didn't say she was a problem. I just said she stands at odds. Let's be blunt. Caitlin Clark stands at odds with mediocrity. She stands at odds with obscurity. She stands at odds with the low expectations that have historically plagued women's professional sports. She does not stand at odds with the WNBA. She is its most powerful engine of growth in a generation. She does not stand at odds with her competitors. She is raising the level of play and the intensity of competition, which benefits every player. She does not stand at odds with the spirit of the game. She embodies its most joyful and skillful aspects. So, what is the real implication? It is the suggestion that her popularity is illegitimate, that it exists outside of or in conflict with the true essence of the league. It paints her success as an anomaly, even a contagion, rather than an integral part of the league's evolution. This is profoundly damaging because it seeks to isolate Clark, to frame her not as a member of the community, but as an outsider whose presence is disruptive. And through it all, the hosts, Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, sat in silence. They did not push back. They did not offer a counter-narrative. They did not interject with a simple, "Hold on, let's also acknowledge what she's done for the league." Their nonverbal communication, the nods, the engaged listening, constituted an endorsement. They provided the platform and the legitimacy for this take to be broadcast. This was not a neutral interview. It was a collaboration in framing. This brings us to the deeper, more disappointing layer, the complicity of the hosts. The fact that this discourse unfolded on their show, under their stewardship, elevates it from a mere media hot take to a symbolic moment within the WNBA's internal culture. Let's examine Sue Bird's role first. Her legacy is unimpeachable. 4-time WNBA champion, 5-time Olympic gold medalist, arguably the greatest point guard in league history. She is an icon, but icon status carries a responsibility, especially in transition. The mark of a true legend is not just what they accomplish, but how they shepherd the sport forward after they leave the court. They have a choice: to be a bridge for the next generation, or a gatekeeper protecting the past. Disturbingly, Bird's actions and comments around Caitlin Clark have consistently leaned toward the latter. This podcast episode is not an isolated incident. She has repeatedly made comments that seem designed to qualify, downplay, or subtly undermine Clark's impact. She has questioned the distribution of credit, hinted that Clark's style might not translate, a prediction proven spectacularly wrong, and generally positioned herself as a skeptic amidst a chorus of acclaim. She has surrounded herself with voices, like that of her partner Megan Rapinoe, who have been openly critical of the attention Clark receives. One must ask, why? Why does a secured legend seem so threatened by a rookie? Is it the sheer scale of the spotlight, which may dwarf what Bird experienced even at her peak? Is it a stylistic difference, Clark's flamboyant, deep-range gunslinging versus Bird's surgical, cerebral efficiency? Is it a cultural shift in how athletes are marketed and consumed? Perhaps it is a combination, but understanding the why does not excuse the behavior. Sue Bird had a clear path before her: to be the elder stateswoman who welcomes the phenom, who validates her talent, and who guides the conversation toward how Clark's success benefits everyone. Instead, she has too often chosen a path of subtle resistance. By hosting a segment where a guest openly mocks Clark's new fans and implies her incompatibility with the league, Bird abdicated that leadership role. She failed to be the mentor the moment required. Then there is Megan Rapinoe. Her case is perhaps the most stark example of cognitive dissonance. Rapinoe has built a large part of her public identity on being a crusader for justice, equity, and respect. She has fought tirelessly for equal pay, for LGBTQ+ rights, and for women athletes to be treated with the same seriousness as men. Her mantra has been about lifting women up, about breaking barriers, and about creating a more inclusive sports world. And yet, in this instance, she sat silently while a young woman in her own sporting ecosystem was being professionally diminished through coded language. Where was the defense of the athlete? Where was the challenge to the gatekeeping of fandom? Where was the principle that a woman's success should be celebrated, not picked apart? Her inaction was a betrayal of her own stated values. Advocacy cannot be selective. True equality means championing all women athletes, especially when they are facing a barrage of unfair criticism from within. By nodding along, Rapinoe's actions spoke volumes, rendering her past words on support and solidarity ring hollow. It revealed a potential bias that the right kind of success, or the right kind of star, conforms to a specific mold, and Caitlin Clark's record-breaking, mainstream-friendly explosion onto the scene disrupts that mold. Their joint complicity transforms the episode from a podcast segment into a microcosm of a larger, troubling dynamic within the WNBA, a tension between the established guard and a transformative new force. Katie Nolan's commentary, and the host's silent approval, was not merely an attack on Caitlin Clark. It was, perhaps more insidiously, an attack on her fans. This is a critical distinction. By framing new viewers as having weird reasons and hyperfixating, she directly questioned the authenticity and value of millions of people who are currently engaging with the WNBA. Let's dismantle this elitist and destructive notion. Who is the new fan Nolan so casually dismisses? She is the mother in Indiana who now watches Fever games with her son because they both marvel at Clark's passing. She is the college student in Oregon who bought a League Pass subscription for the first time. He is the lifelong NBA fan in New York who decided to give the WNBA a serious look because the highlights were impossible to ignore. She is the young girl in California who now believes she can shoot from anywhere on the court because she saw Clark do it. These are not abstract numbers on a rating sheet. They are human beings whose connection to the sport, however it began, is real and valuable. The implication that their fandom is less legitimate because it was catalyzed by a single player is not only insulting, it is historically ignorant. This is how sports leagues grow. They grow through charismatic superstars who become cultural touchstones. Did every Chicago Bulls fan in the 1,990 seconds have a deep historical knowledge of the franchise's pre-Jordan struggles? No. They came from Michael, and many stayed for a lifetime love of the Bulls and the NBA. Did every tennis fan in the 1,970 seconds appreciate the sport's genteel history before John McEnroe's combustible brilliance and Chris Everett's rivalries drew them in? Unlikely. LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Serena Williams' transcendent figures act as gravitational forces, pulling in audiences who then, through exposure, develop a broader appreciation for the sport. The WNBA has begged for this kind of star-driven growth for 27 years. It has craved a player who could crack the mainstream consciousness in a sustained way. Now that it has happened, the response from some quarters is to scrutinize the provenance of the new fans, to suggest they are somehow diluting the fan base. This is the height of ingratitude and strategic foolishness. Think of the practical impact. These new fans are the ones driving unprecedented television ratings, which lead to bigger media rights deals. They are the ones buying out road arenas, creating a playoff-like atmosphere in mid-June and injecting direct revenue into other franchises. They are the ones purchasing jerseys and merchandise, making Clark one of the best-selling athletes in all of sports. This revenue directly funds the league's operations and, by extension, contributes to the salaries and opportunities for all players, including veterans and rookies alike. To insult this fan base is to bite the hand that is feeding the league's most significant growth spurt ever. It is a message that says, your money is welcome, but your passion is suspect. It is a surefire way to alienate the very people who could become the durable, long-term foundation the WNBA needs. Why would a casual fan, excited to join something new, continue to engage if they are immediately met with gatekeeping and dismissal from the league's own icons? This creates a toxic paradox. For years, the complaint was, nobody watches. Now, the complaint from some is, the wrong people are watching, and for the wrong reasons. It is an impossible standard that seems designed not to grow the game, but to protect a certain, narrow conception of it. So, we arrive at the uncomfortable core question. Why? Why has Caitlin Clark become such a lightning rod for such intense and coded hostility from within the very community she entered? To believe this is solely about basketball is naive. The on-court physicality, the welcome to the league moments, are a normal part of professional sports. The extraordinary element is the volume and tenor of the off-court commentary from figures like Bird, Rapinoe, and others in the media. The answer lies in a confluence of factors that make Clark a disruptive force to established narratives and power structures. The disruption of established hierarchies. The WNBA, like any institution, has an established order. There are veterans, stars, and MVP candidates who have paid their dues and earned their recognition. Along comes a rookie who, before playing a single minute, commands a larger media footprint, higher jersey sales, and more mainstream buzz than any of them. This disrupts the traditional seniority-based ecosystem. It can feel unfair to those who have built the league brick by brick. The resentment is not necessarily toward Clark personally, but toward the phenomenon she represents, a shifting of the center of gravity that can feel disrespectful to past contributions. The clash of styles and personas. Clark plays with a swagger, a confidence that borders on cockiness to some. She shimmies, she talks trash, she shoots from the logo in transition. This is a distinctly modern, NBA-influenced style of self-expression. It contrasts with a perhaps more traditionally team-first, understated persona that has been valorized in women's sports. To some, her style may read as individualistic or showy, clashing with a collective ethos. Furthermore, Clark's background, a white, heterosexual woman from the Midwest, does not align with the identity of many of the league's most prominent stars and vocal advocates, who are often women of color and/or members of the LGBTQ+ community. This does not mean the criticism is solely about identity, but it adds a complex layer to the dynamic. Clark's path to superstardom and the demographic of many of her most visible fans can be perceived as benefiting from a mainstream appeal that others have fought to create but not fully accessed. The earned versus granted narrative. There is a palpable sense from critics that Clark's popularity was somehow granted by a fickle media, rather than earned on the court. This ignores the objective truth. She is the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history, men's or women's. She broke records that stood for decades. She took a regional program to back-to-back national championship games. Her college games were regularly the most watched in the sport. Her popularity is a direct, quantifiable result of historic performance. Yet, the narrative pushed by some is that this attention is disproportionate or unearned, a product of hype rather than merit. This allows them to dismiss her fans as gullible and her success as a media creation. The fear of the one-player league. This is the most charitable interpretation of the criticism, but it is still flawed. The concern is that the WNBA becomes perceived as the Caitlin Clark League, that the narrative dominance of one player overshadows the depth of talent and the stories of other incredible athletes. This is a valid concern for any league. However, the solution is not to tear down the rising tide, but to use its energy to lift all boats. The media, the league, and its veterans have a responsibility to say, yes, watch Caitlin Clark, and also watch Aja Wilson's dominance, Breanna Stewart's versatility, Sabrina Ionescu's shooting, and the rivalry of the Liberty and Sunday. The answer is expansive storytelling, not reductive criticism of the catalyst. Katie Nolan's podcast comments tap directly into this stew of unresolved tensions. The hyperfixation line speaks to the fear of a one-player league. The stands at odds language hints at the cultural and stylistic clash. The dismissal of new fans' reasons reflects the earned versus granted resentment, and Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe, by their assent, legitimized this framing. They chose to side with the forces of protectionism over the forces of expansion. To the fans of Caitlin Clark, who have felt the sting of this dismissal, your fandom is not weird. It is the lifeblood of the sport's future. You answered a call that has been made for decades. Do not let anyone make you feel like an outsider in a house you helped build. Your viewership, your passion, your economic support is exactly what the WNBA has needed. Continue to support Clark, support the league, and demand better from its commentators and icons. Your voice matters. To the WNBA as an institution, its players, and its affiliated media, this is your inflection point. History is watching. You have the opportunity to cement a legacy of growth and mainstream acceptance that has been elusive for 27 years. This requires swallowing pride, checking egos, and making a conscious, unified decision to ride the wave of this moment rather than fight against its current. Caitlin Clark is not the antagonist in this story. She is the catalyst. She is the proof of concept. She is the tangible evidence that women's basketball can command the sports world's center stage. The question is whether the ecosystem around her will be smart enough and gracious enough to build a lasting empire upon the foundation she has laid. The ball, as they say, is in their court. Let's hope they choose to play the right game.